Hey guys, John Paulamy here, Actionable Intelligence. Today is Saturday, May 4th, 2019, and this is the weekly market update. So I'm going to change up the format a little bit and have my weekly rant and then whatever questions or comments I've gotten through various forums, whether they're the comment section of these videos or what people email to me. Kind of want to foster that community and make sure you guys are getting involved here and making sure that when I answer a question, it may be a question that you had in your mind also. So that's going to be the format going forward, and then I'll roll into my weekly discussion on the topic that I find most interesting. So this week on the rant here, I want to talk a little bit about patience, and especially when it applies to investing and speculating in contrarian type situations, which basically is what I do and what I think a lot of listeners and people that subscribe to me are interested in. And I think in order to be successful basically in any type of investing or speculating, you have to have patience. I saw a graph the other day that showed the average holding period for stocks has consistently declined over the last several decades. I mean, it was not uncommon 30 years ago for the average stock holding period for a holding in a person's portfolio to be 8 years. And now it's declined to less than a year. So I guess what I have found when I discuss investing in the markets or speculating, especially in turnaround situations or situations that are very undervalued, they're undervalued for a reason. The market has abandoned them. The fundamentals do not appear to be very good. But what we're doing and what our advantage is that we are second tier and third tier thinkers, and we are seeing beyond the headlines into the future. We are seeing an example with uranium, the demand is there, the supply is not. At some point that turns around. Now, it's not necessarily going to happen this week or next week, but eventually will happen. And when it does, things are so undervalued that the return that we're going to get makes it worth the wait. I think it's critical that people master this fundamental virtue, if you will, because without it, you cannot be successful. You will not be successful. A lot of people think they're going to trade their way in this thing, and I'm just not a trader. I don't try to capture 20% here or 20% there. I've tried it. My timing, I'm just not a market timer. Most people aren't. If you look at all of the great investors over time, people that have been successful in the markets, I don't recall seeing too many market timers. What I see is people that buy things cheaply and sit on them and sit on them and sit on them and let the turnaround happen, or buy a company or companies that have great fundamentals, and then just wait for that wealth compounding. So I think there's just this thing innate with us that is genetic, where we just feel like we have to do something. We can't. It's very hard to just sit there and not do anything. And this applies to everything. I'll give an example. It's spring, of course, and down in South Texas where I live, in our backyard, my wife found a hatchling that had fallen out of a nest. Now, this bird was fairly developed. It couldn't fly, of course, yet. So the best thing to do when you go on YouTube is to just put it back in the nest if you can, or put it in a makeshift nest as close to the parents, and they will come and deal with it. And then you have to get away from it. You have to stay away from it. Let the parents get comfortable with coming back, and they will take care of their own offspring. They've got a lot of time and effort invested into this hatchling, and if you get it close to the nest where they can see it, they're watching you while you're doing all this. They will deal with it. That's what all of the people on YouTube say. So I go, my wife makes a little makeshift nest. I go up and I duct tape it up near the birdhouse as far as I could get on a ladder. And then, of course, I go back inside and I'm doing my things that I'm doing. And I go out there, look out the back window, and my wife is constantly going up there and looking into the nest. I've told her you can't do that. If you do that, the parents are not going to come with you standing there, going looking at it every 5 minutes. There's nothing you can do. We have done what the Texas wildlife video said to do, and now let's let nature take its course and stay away from it, which you just couldn't resist it. So, in the end, we ended up having to take the thing down because the parents just wouldn't deal with it, with her constantly every 15 minutes climbing up on a ladder and looking in on this thing. So we had to bring it into the house and basically, raise it ourselves now until it gets to the age where it can be released. So that's kind of an example, not necessarily with investing, but that's just what people do. It's the same thing like people that are novice bakers or people that are trying to learn how to cook. They'll constantly open the oven or they'll open the grill top when they're smoking something or cooking something on the grill. They'll constantly, or in the oven, they'll constantly open and close the oven. You're dissipating the heat. You are sabotaging your efforts in creating bread or that good good smoked brisket you're trying to make. So I think it's just innate in our nature for whatever reason. We want to be hands-on. We want to feel like we're doing something, and you have to overcome that urge, especially in investing, because if you're constantly wringing your hands, if you are constantly being impatient, you're going to trade in and out. The only people that are going to get wealthy are the people that are your brokers. So, especially in contrarian investing, we just don't know the timing of when these things are going to turn around. When something's bombed out 90%, general investors are gone. There's just a few people at the bottom that get the business, and you're not going to see a turn until you see that generalist money come back into the sector. It's what I'm specifically talking about in uranium investing. It's just the people are not coming back to the sector because there's just nothing happening right now. So what I suggest for people to do is, like I said, people will say, well, how do we know when it's going to turn? I have no idea when things are going to turn around. I have absolutely no freaking clue, and nor does anybody else. What we do know is that supply is going down, demand is going up. At some point in the future, those things intersect, prices start going up, and then generalist money will start coming back in, okay? And that will be the catalyst to move the prices up. I don't know when that's going to happen. If you can't sit still for a year, 2 years, maybe 3 years, who knows? And people will say, well, Howard Marks says being early is just the same as being wrong. Not in something like uranium investing. When this thing gets going, these stocks are going to move, believe me, sufficiently to compensate you for that time that you waited. So what I'm doing, for example, I'm going to talk about Cameco's first quarter results in their conference call later in this discussion. And, they are every quarter getting more and more positive about the uranium business, and yet the stock traded down this week. It was under $11. It was down around, I think I picked up shares at $10.39. I mean, it's cheap. That's what I recommend you do. If the fundamentals haven't changed and the things go on discount, you got to buy them. I mean, if you like Hawaiian shirts and they cost $40 and they're blowing them out at Kohl's for $20, I'm going to go down and buy a half dozen. That's just how it is. So same thing applies here. You got to have that patience. If you don't have it, you simply will not be successful. You're not going to trade these things. You may catch a few here and there. I see people on message boards bragging, but I don't see them on the Forbes top 100 wealthiest people. I don't see stock trader in there. It just doesn't happen, guys. So if the fundamentals are correct, you understand them, you're confident in them, you have conviction, you just sit tight, and like I said before, you got to be patient. You have to work on it, and no one can do it for you. Everybody listening to this intellectually gets it, but it's just so hard to do. So that's kind of my rant for this week, because I just see so many people. I've said it before. So many people are just going to miss out because they just can't sit and not do anything. Questions and comments for this week. Like I said, I always encourage questions and comments. I'm not a know-it-all. I'm a generalist investor. I'm not an expert in any of these sectors that I talk about, but I have a general knowledge, and I do talk to some people that are experts. And I like to relate knowledge, and I like to get questions, and I like to get comments. So here's a couple for this week. When we talked about, red teaming our thesis, a guy kicked it back to me on the comment section. One of the comments was, one of the things that, to think about is maybe Kazakhstan increasing production out of greed. He says, I've read a couple sources that say they have announced supply increase to keep pace with Indian nuclear builds. Doing so could delay price movements in uranium another decade. Can we afford to be that early and wrong? Look, there was news out this week that the Kazakhs had cut their production was down 4% in the first quarter. They've reaffirmed that they are going to be on target to lower their production by 20% over the next couple years. Yes, anything's possible, but the days of the Soviet 5-year plans and increasing production just for the sake of making the organization bigger are pretty much over. The old guard's being swept out in Kazakhstan. The president resigned this week. They're going to have elections in June. So a new, younger crop of people are coming up. KazAtomProm went public. They are going to be more scrutinized now by the financial sector. People are going to look at their numbers. People are going to ask the company questions. And I think that, they want to use a resource. They control 45% of the world uranium market. I think that, just flooding the market for the sake of doing it is not maximizing the return on their resource. Now, they've stated in the past that they want to maximize the return. I can only go by what they say, and we can observe what they do. Anything is possible, but I just do not see them doing that. I think they want to keep their market share, of course. I think they will bid aggressively for contracts with their customers against other suppliers, but for them, I don't see why they would just flood the market and crash the price. They already have 45% of the market. They are going to require massive amounts of reinvestment to maintain their production levels, and I just don't see that happening anytime soon. So anything's possible, but I don't think that's something to worry about. The next comment was, what if 232 is struck down by Trump? The U.S. still has the option of closing down more of the nuclear utility sector and building out natural gas plants, which is cheap and plentiful. Why is nuclear power required aside from military uses? Natural gas can provide base load cheaper, and in times of economic turmoil, no one cares about carbon emissions, just cost. Well, no one cares about the United States. Get it through your head, people. The U.S. is in decline. The action on nuclear builds is not in the U.S. It's not going to be in the U.S. It's look across the Pacific Ocean to China, India, emerging markets, frontier markets. That's where the growth is coming from. The United States, with the current administration, is not going. They're giving loan guarantees to keep Project Vodal going forward with, I believe it's Southern Company. So the Trump administration realizes that China and Russia, this is a high-tech game. It's very important. China and Russia are starting to dominate now the nuclear power industry. They're exporting their technology. They are building reactors that they are going to run and supply nuclear material to in different countries. And that cross-border things also ties these countries closer to Chinese and Russian spheres of influence. The United States cannot afford to sit back while the Chinese and Russians use economic means and nuclear power as a method to expand their influence around the world. So everything that I've seen from the Trump administration vis-a-vis nuclear energy has been to take the small little ember that remains of the U.S. nuclear energy industry and fan it and put kindling on it and try to get that fire going again. That's what I see the Trump administration doing. Now, certainly, again, anything's possible. This is correct. Natural gas is quicker to build and cheaper to run than nuclear, but the United States is the largest economy in the world, and the largest economy in the world needs fuel diversification. I do not see this as being a major problem. As it relates to 232, I really don't care about 232. 232 is basically whatever the Trump administration decides one way or another, it doesn't really matter long term to the fuel market in the context of the fact that all it's doing right now is providing a blanket and cloud of uncertainty over the market. Markets do not like uncertainty. They want certainty. They want to know what the outcome is. So if there's some outcome of 232 that the market deems negative, then that will be a short-term downside probably. If it's positive, the same thing will happen, and certain stocks will benefit. Long-term, as it relates to the entire uranium market, I don't really think it matters, except for the fact, like I mentioned earlier, that the level of uncertainty is finally lifted off the market, and market actors and participants will then feel more confident in taking a position one way or another. So let's get to Cameco's first quarter results call. Basically, these are just things I've gleaned out of their call transcript, which I will put a link to in the show notes. I suggest you listen to the call. I suggest you read the transcript. This is a wealth of information about the market. This is the 800-pound gorilla. These are the people that are most plugged in and know what's going on, and they freely talk about what their views are. Obviously, it's skewed towards their book and to their business, but I'm an owner of Cameco. I think it should be a cornerstone of any nuclear or uranium fuel portfolio. So going forward, this is the comments that I got. So let me just say what Tim Gitzel said at the start, and I think you need to really read this and listen to it about 10 times if you're in this business or if you're going to invest in these companies. Progress in our business is not measured in weeks and months, but in years. Again, years, not weeks or months. Remember we talked about holding periods during the rant? This is going to take a while, but once it gets going, I think that people are going to be richly rewarded. He talked about McArthur River, Key Lake is coming back, supported by the very robust economic shown in the recent technical report for this operation and a significant value we expect it will create when it comes back into production. However, we do not intend to restart, he's talking about McArthur River, until we are able to commit those valuable pounds under acceptable long-term contracts. There's no reason to dig up this crown jewel and sell it at cheap prices when you can go into the spot market or go and buy other people's uranium for $25 or $28 or $29 a pound and sell it into your long-term contracts. There's just no reason to do it, and they're not going to do it. I think this is an important thing that people are always wanting to know what Cameco's doing vis-a-vis the spot market and its purchased uranium. They said they expect to take delivery of 19 million and 20 million pounds of purchased uranium just to meet our current 2019 delivery commitment. About 60% of this material is expected to come from the spot market. They go on to say, as it relates to their purchasing, that we still have some purchasing activity ahead of us yet this year in order to fulfill our contracted sales. So you'll notice these are all in quotes. These are direct quotes from the transcript. So 19 to 21 million pounds really represents the floor for our purchasing activity in 2019. That's why I say you got to go back and read this thing and pay attention to what they're doing. They're going to be active in the spot market. They actually talked about putting an RFP out for a certain amount of pounds, and they could not get any decent bids back. So what that's telling me is that the spot market is starting to dry up. I mean, regardless of where the price is, they talked about why the price regressed. There were some people out there, speculators, that I think they said bought with the idea that the spot market was going to move up rather quickly and sooner than anticipated. And when it didn't, they decided to dump their pounds. So they also talked about a Japanese utility offering 150,000 pounds a year for several years, and how this is could be anticipated, some people to think that this is going to lead to the Japanese puking up all of these pounds. But 150 pounds and 150,000 pounds and 190 million pound per year market is not even a rounding error. It's like 0.001%. It's nothing. And then you see a Japanese trading house is committing to investing hundreds or millions of dollars in a joint venture with Deep Yellow in Namibia. I don't put any credence into the fact that Japan is going to dump all these pounds on the market. At the end of the first quarter, Cameco is sitting on $1.2 billion in cash. They do have some debt coming due, but with a market cap of $4.3 billion and sitting on $1.2 billion in cash, these guys aren't going anywhere. That's why I consider it a cornerstone of a uranium mining portfolio. I like what Gitzel said here when he's talking about the whole nuclear view around the world, especially in the Western countries, which I consider, the goofiness that we're seeing in Western Europe and the U.S., especially with the view towards nuclear energy. With all these countries in Europe, especially talking about shutting their nuclear reactors down, what you'll note is you'll see these pronouncements in the headlines, and then you'll see a subsequent follow-up that nobody talks about, where France says, yes, we're going to shut these things down, but they keep extending the shutdowns out by a decade or more. So I like what he says here. He says, I've seen this movie twice before. Nuclear falls out of favor politically, and a number of countries announce they're going to reduce reliance on or phase out nuclear. Then the world steps back and examines its options for carbon-free baseload sources of electricity and realizes the options are limited. I think that's said succinctly and correctly. Politicians do one thing. I don't think they care about anything except getting reelected. That may be cynical for some people. I know some people may not agree with that. They'll say anything, do anything to get reelected. And then reality is reality. I mean, you can crap in one hand and, spit in the other one. I mean, it's just which one's going to fill up first. Bullshit walks and money talks. It's just the bottom line. And you're not going to phase out nuclear unless you want to go back to some kind of agrarian, minimalist society. And most people don't want to do that. Most people like air conditioning and refrigeration. So support for nuclear is growing, and the demand for nuclear fuel is certain and growing. Supply is less certain and, in fact, declining. There's your thesis. You just got to sit and wait, and you just got to keep putting new money into quality companies, and you will get paid off. When is that going to happen? I don't know, a year, 2, 3. I don't know what's going to happen. It's going to happen. With decreasing primary supply, result of curtailments, and the competition for supplying the spot market from producers and financial players, the interest in long-term contracting is once again starting to pick up. So the business is good, or not, shouldn't say good, the business is improving quarter to quarter. The comments are going from cautiously optimistic a couple quarters to go to improving, getting better, seeing signs of interest, all these things. So I don't know why you do anything except for just sit and wait for this to happen. Going back to the comments earlier, when somebody talked about KazAtomProm, so KazAtomProm's uranium production for the first quarter of 2019 was 4% down from the same period in 2018 as the Kazakh company continues with its plan to reduce production. Remember, let's watch what they do, not what we say. Let's not speculate too much. If they say they're going to cut production and they're actually cutting it, then that's good. The company said its production expectations remain unchanged and are consistent with its ongoing intention to flex down planned production volumes by 20% over 2018 to 2020. So there you have it. That's the review for this week. Appreciate comments, questions. I'll be incorporating those. Guys, this is really all about you. I want to help you out. I mean, I turned 52 in a week, and I made a lot of mistakes early in my career. I know from the demographics of this channel, there's a lot of young people, guys out there. I don't want you to make the mistakes that I made. I could be tremendously wealthy right now, and I left a lot of money on the table because I didn't have patience. I didn't know what I was doing, and I wish I would have, understood, what some of the great investors of all time knew and got it through my head. You're not going to be a trader. You're not going to beat the averages. The way you do that, the way you get extraordinary returns is find 50 cents or $1 selling for 50 cents, and then you buy value and you wait for it to turn. And sometimes it takes a long time. I've had it happen before where I've bought things and they immediately start going up, but it doesn't normally happen that way. It happened in the gold market the same way. It was a slow getting going. It was the same thing on a lot of things. Where I've had great success, I had to wait. And then when it gets going, you get paid off and you move on to the next. That's why you got to have several sectors. It's good to understand your fundamentals, and then you just got to be able to compartmentalize what's going on and just shut the door there on what's going on in this uranium market. As long as the fundamentals improve, you're going to be okay. If you want to put new money to work on these dips, that's what you should do, be buying quality. That's my advice. So thanks for listening, and I appreciate it, and we'll talk to you next week.